Welcome to today's devotional message on trusting God always. You prayed, you fasted, you waited, and still, silence. Maybe this message is the sign you didn't know you needed. If these words meet you right where you are, like, share, and subscribe. It helps us reach more souls who need God's comfort. And comment below with your favorite Bible promise, or the one you're still holding on to in the waiting. Let's begin, and let His Word breathe new life into yours. You sit by the window, watching the world move outside. Cars pass, people hurry by, seasons change, news breaks. Life feels undeniably, sometimes overwhelmingly, in motion for everyone else. Inside, you feel static, a deep stillness that borders on stagnation. You're trapped, or so it feels, in a waiting room with no clear exit sign, no posted schedule for when your number will be called. Perhaps it's a dream deferred, a vision that seems to have lost its color, a prayer that echoes only back to you, seemingly unheard. Maybe it's a future that feels not just uncertain, but utterly frozen, a landscape of what-ifs and when-wills that offer no solid ground. You've poured out your heart, laid bare every fear, every need, every longing at the foot of the cross. You expected a breakthrough, an open door swinging wide, a sudden, undeniable shift in circumstances. But the silence stretches, heavy and oppressive, a blanket of uncertainty draped not just over your situation, but over your very soul. You've scrolled through feeds, listened to testimonies, watched others receive their answers. The job, the healing, the reconciliation, the new beginning. They walk through their open doors with smiles that feel like a stark contrast to the persistent ache in your own chest. And you find yourself wrestling with the quiet, insidious pain of comparing timelines. Why them and not me? The question isn't born of jealousy, but of a raw, vulnerable insecurity. Does God see me? Does He hear my specific, whispered prayers amidst the noise of the world? Is my story somehow less important, less visible, less worthy of divine intervention, of that miraculous touch? It's in these moments, these prolonged seasons of waiting that feel less like a pause and more like a permanent state, that faith isn't a mountaintop experience bathed in glorious sunlight. No, here, faith is a gritty, tear-stained journey through the valley floor. It feels profoundly counterintuitive to trust when nothing seems to be happening, when the heavens feel brass and your own efforts feel like pushing against a mountain. The enemy, ever the deceiver, sees the cracks forming in your weary heart and whispers doubts like sharp pebbles into the quiet corners of your mind. You're forgotten here. This will never change. The breakthrough is for everyone else. You might as well give up. But somewhere deep within you, beneath the layers of weariness and doubt, a flicker persists, a tiny ember of hope, fragile perhaps, but fiercely refusing to be extinguished. This message, this quiet conversation, is for that ember. It's for the weary heart that has waited, wondered, and sometimes, in moments of raw honesty, desperately wanted to walk away from it all. It's a gentle, firm reminder that God is not absent in the stillness. He is profoundly present. And the waiting? It's not a punishment, not a sign of His neglect. It is a sacred space, a divine process, where He is doing a work you cannot yet see, shaping you in ways you cannot yet comprehend, preparing things you cannot yet imagine. If you feel unseen, unheard, or simply stuck in the pause, know this truth. Cling to it. God is absolutely, undeniably with you in the waiting. He has a purpose for this season, even if it feels like a wilderness. And His presence, that is your greatest, most foundational promise. The wilderness is often where the deepest wells are found, and the waiting is where strength you didn't know you had is forged. The storm rages just outside the small, flickering lamp of your hope. You clutch the lamp, shielding the flame with trembling hands, wondering if it's worth it, if the oil will last through the long night. The promises felt so clear in the daylight, so vibrant on the mountaintop. Now, in the relentless darkness of delay, they feel like distant stars, beautiful but unreachable. You remember stories of Moses waiting decades in the desert, of Joseph forgotten in a dungeon, of Abraham waiting for the son of promise, of a Savior hidden in a tomb for 3 days. Their stories feel both comforting and daunting. They waited, yes, but they were heroes of faith. Am I? The wind howls, carrying the echoes of past disappointments. You've built structures on seemingly solid ground before, only to see them crumble. You've planted seeds with eager expectation, only to watch them wither in unexpected frost. Now, the very thought of investing hope feels risky, vulnerable. It's easier sometimes to just exist in the waiting room, numb to both the pain and the possibility. But the ember of hope, small as it is, refuses this easy surrender. It whispers of a God who makes rivers in the desert, who calls stars by name, who specializes in the impossible. Perhaps the greatest struggle in the waiting isn't the external circumstance, but the internal battle against despair. It's the fight to believe that God is good when things are not good, that He is working even when you see no evidence. This is the crucible of faith. It's not about having all the answers. It's about trusting the one who holds them. It's not about seeing the path ahead. It's about walking in the light He gives for the next step. You don't need a roadmap. You need His hand to hold. The spiritual insight here is profound in its simplicity, yet revolutionary in its application. God's timing is not a delay, it is an appointment. His silence is not absence, it is often preparation. The wilderness isn't always a consequence of sin. It can be a divine strategy for intimacy and strengthening. He isn't just planning your future. He is cultivating your soul in the present. The work He is doing unseen within you, the deepening of character, the refining of motives, the learning of patience, the shedding of self-reliance, is often more crucial than the external breakthrough you yearn for. The oil lamp must be trimmed and filled before the bridegroom arrives. Your heart must be prepared to steward the promise. He is not asking you for relentless strength in this moment, though strength will surely come. He is asking for gentle surrender. Surrender your timeline. Surrender your expectations of how He should answer. Surrender your need to understand the why of the waiting. It's in the letting go that you create space for Him to work in ways you could never manipulate or force. This waiting season, this quiet room, is an invitation to lean not on your own understanding, but on His. It is a call to shift your focus from the problem to the provider, from the stillness to the one who commands the waves and the wind, and yes, even the silent spaces in your life. Take a quiet moment now. Close your eyes. Acknowledge the ache. Acknowledge the doubt. Then, gently, like releasing a breath you've been holding too long, release it to Him. Picture that tiny ember of hope within you. Whisper to it, God sees you. God hears you. God is working even now in the unseen. The journey through the valley is the path to the mountaintop. Trust the journey. Trust the guide. Trust the quiet, unseen hand that is holding you, sustaining you, shaping you in the sacred space of waiting. He is with you, always. She kneels again, not because her prayer changed, but because hope refused to die. The weight of the unanswered question presses down, a physical ache behind her ribs. Another day closes, another opportunity passes, another door remains stubbornly shut. It's the third month of the year, or maybe the third year of this specific season of dryness. The calendar pages turn, marking time, but her life feels paused, a bookmark left indefinitely in the middle of a chapter. Doubt, a familiar shadow, lengthens in the fading light. What if I misunderstood? What if the promise wasn't for me? This isn't a fleeting moment of questioning. It's a prolonged siege on her faith. The mustard seed feels impossibly small against the mountain of the obstacle. She waters it with tears, yet the mountain doesn't budge. She remembers stories of wilderness wanderings, 40 years for a journey that should have taken 11 days. 40 years of manna, of cloud by day and fire by night, constant reminders of God's presence and provision, yet a persistent inability to enter the fullness of the promise. Why the detour? Why the delay? The spiritual insight whispers back. The wilderness was necessary for a generation to pass away, a generation whose hearts were still tied to the slavery they'd left behind, unable to trust the God who had delivered them. God wasn't just changing their location, He was changing their hearts. He wasn't delaying the promise because He was unwilling. He was delaying it until His people were ready to possess it in faith, not fear. The delay was part of the purification, part of the preparation for possessing the impossible. Could her own waiting season be a similar sacred wilderness? Not a punishment, but a preparation. A time for old ways of thinking, old fears, old dependencies to pass away, replaced by a deeper, more resilient faith. She looks at her hands, calloused not from labor, but from gripping too tightly, trying to force doors open, trying to manipulate outcomes. God isn't just preparing the blessing, He's preparing her for the blessing. He's not just getting things ready, He's getting her ready. This invisible work in the soul is often more transformative than any external change. He is stripping away the need for control, replacing it with a quiet confidence in His control. He is exchanging frantic striving for peaceful surrender. This feels like a paradox. You feel most stuck, yet you are most profoundly in motion in God's hands. You feel least prepared for what's next, yet He is making you ready in ways you cannot perceive. She opens her Bible to Isaiah 43:19. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Do you not perceive it? The words hit her like a gentle challenge. Her eyes are so focused on the absence of the old familiar path, the lack of the expected stream, that she is blind to the new thing He is doing, the way He is making right beneath her feet in the very wilderness she inhabits. The promised streams aren't necessarily where she expected them, nor do they look like the rivers she imagined. They are springing up in the wasteland, small perhaps at first, barely noticeable, a quiet trickle of hope, a divine appointment she might miss if she's only looking for a flood. The relatable moment is the persistent feeling of stagnation, the fear that nothing is happening, the temptation to abandon hope because the evidence is lacking. The spiritual insight is that God's work in the waiting is often unseen, focusing on internal transformation and purification, making us ready for the promise. He is creating new paths, new sources of life, in the very places that feel desolate. The call to reflection is this: what old dependencies or fears is God trying to prune away in this wilderness season? Where is He trying to make a new stream of faith spring up in your wasteland? Can you trust that even when you don't perceive it, He is doing a new thing? Can you lean into the paradox that feeling most stuck is often a sign of being most actively worked on by God? It's not easy, this walking by faith, when sight offers only barren land. But the same God who led His people through the wilderness with cloud and fire is leading you now. His presence is your promise. His unseen work is your progress. Trust Him to make a way where there seems to be none. Trust Him to bring streams to your wasteland. The long journey, though it feels like a single, static moment, has been a series of quiet transformations. The urgency has softened, replaced by a deep, steady current of peace. The fear has lessened its grip, not because the future is clear, but because the author of the future is near. This season, which once felt like a prison of not yet, has become a sacred space where faith learned to breathe without the oxygen of certainty. The wilderness wasn't the end. It was the forging place. The waiting wasn't a pause. It was the preparation. Reflect on the timeless truth. God's faithfulness is not dependent on our circumstances, but on His character. He is faithful not because we are good or patient or strong, but because He is good, and His nature is covenant-keeping love. The hidden seasons of our lives, the valleys where only God sees the tears and the struggle, are often the most potent chapters in His story for us. They are where reliance shifts entirely from self to Savior, where the truth of my grace is sufficient moves from a verse on a page to the bedrock of our existence. To walk in trust, not by sight, is not a passive resignation. It is an active choice to believe what God has said over what our limited senses perceive. It is choosing to stand on the promises even when the ground beneath us feels shaky. It is leaning into the uncomfortable truth that sometimes growth happens most profoundly in the dark, like a seed pushing through soil. And in the end, God turns these hidden seasons into holy stories. The struggle becomes strength. The waiting becomes wisdom. The unseen work becomes undeniable evidence of His grace. The ache transforms into empathy for others in their valleys. The doubt gives way to a tested, unshakable faith that has seen the faithfulness of God forged in the fire. They didn't see the end of the story, didn't know how the wilderness would conclude or when the promise would arrive. But they trusted the author, and that was enough. The words feel heavy on your tongue, tasting of old pleas and forgotten hopes. You've poured out the same prayer, 1,000 times perhaps, maybe more. It's the one that sits deep in your gut, the one that keeps you awake at night, the one that feels essential for life to move forward. You've recited the details, painted the picture of the need with raw, aching honesty before the invisible God. You've clung to verses like life rafts in a storm, quoting promises, reminding heaven of what was said. You've perhaps even felt the hunger pangs of a fast, adding a physical ache to the spiritual longing, a tangible cry in the silence. And yet, the response feels like nothing but air, a vast, indifferent quiet. What bounces back, feels suspiciously like the faint echo of your own voice, reverberating off the walls of what feels like an empty, distant heaven. It's in these moments, bathed in the stark light of unanswered waiting, that the whispers of doubt begin. A cold, insidious question creeps into the space where faith once stood firm. Is God even listening? You replay the prayers in your mind, dissecting the words, the tone, searching for a hidden flaw. Did I say it wrong? Was my faith not strong enough this time? The enemy loves to sow these seeds of condemnation and confusion in the barren ground of waiting. He wants you to believe the silence is proof of God's absence, or worse, his disinterest. He wants you to see the echoes as rejection. But the spiritual insight here, often veiled in the very silence that troubles you, is profound and transformative. Waiting in prayer isn't a sign of being ignored. It's often an invitation into deeper reliance. This season isn't punishment. It's often preparation. It's a refining fire designed to burn away the dross of a transactional view of faith. The kind that sees prayer as merely an equation. I do this, pray, therefore God must do that. Receive immediately. It's an invitation out of the marketplace of divine transactions and into the quiet, often challenging, garden of relationship. It calls us to trust the heart of God even, and perhaps especially, when we don't understand His hand or feel His immediate intervention. Consider the psalmist, lost in the wilderness of his own unanswered questions. His prayer isn't a polite request, it's a guttural cry from the depths of despair. How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? Psalm 13:1. This isn't a saint on a mountaintop. This is a soul wrestling in the valley, lost in the fog of delay. This raw, honest lament is not outside the scriptural journey of faith. It is part of it. It's the roadmap of countless believers who have walked this path before you, feeling forgotten, invisible, unheard. Your waiting doesn't disqualify you from God's attention or love. Paradoxically, it often qualifies you for a deeper, more intimate encounter with His patient faithfulness, His unwavering character that holds steady even when your circumstances do not. What if the silence isn't an absence of God, but an opportunity to learn the language of His quiet presence? What if He isn't withholding the answer, but revealing Himself in a way you weren't listening for, a way you couldn't perceive amidst the noise of your own urgent requests? Sometimes the greatest strength is found not in gripping harder to the outcome you desire, but in loosening the grip of control and surrendering to the unseen work He is doing within you and around the situation. Maybe He's not building the house you asked for yet, because He's still laying a foundation you didn't know you needed. Perhaps He's allowing the echoes not to mock you, but to teach your soul to discern the faintest whisper of His Spirit above the clamor of your fears. Don't stop speaking to Him in the waiting. Your persistence is a form of trust, a refusal to believe the silence is final. But begin to listen differently. Begin to look for His presence in ways that go beyond immediate answers to your specific request. Look for the subtle signs of His sustaining grace, the unexpected flicker of hope, the peace that inexplicably enters your heart despite the raging storm outside. His timing is not slow, though it feels excruciatingly long to your impatient heart. His timing is perfect, orchestrated with wisdom that spans eternity. And in this season of echoes, He is refining your ability to trust Him in the unseen, to believe in His goodness Not because you see his hand moving, but because you know his heart is eternally, irrevocably good. The waiting is not a pause in his work. It is often the work itself. The silence isn't empty. It's full of whispers. The longer you wait, the louder those internal voices become. They curl around your thoughts like tendrils of fog, whispering, "Maybe you heard God wrong. Maybe this promise wasn't meant for you. Maybe this isn't meant to be. Maybe you're just not good enough, faithful enough, anything enough." The stillness you longed for becomes a canvas for self-indictment. You start replaying past mistakes, dissecting every misstep, searching for reasons, for evidence, for anything that could explain why God might be withholding his favor, delaying his response, leaving you here, stranded in the quiet. This internal struggle, this is the battleground of faith. It's as real as the ground beneath your feet, as heavy as the storm clouds gathering on the horizon of your hope. The spiritual insight arrives like a lifeline in the tempest. Doubt is often not a reflection of God's absence, but the enemy's tactic to isolate you, to make you feel forgotten, and to subtly erode your trust in God's unwavering character. It's not necessarily a fundamental lack of faith that grips you, but a very human, very raw response to the intense pressure of the unknown, the vast expanse of the unanswered prayer. Sometimes, the strongest faith is forged not in the clarity, but in the confusion. Consider the ancient echoes of Abraham. God painted a future for him, a son, a nation, when his body was old, worn by years, and Sarah, his wife, was far past the age of bearing children. Genesis 15. The promise was impossibly large, stretching far beyond the horizon of human possibility. Years passed. The sun rose and set, seasons turned, and still no son. Doubt must have whispered. It must have tapped insistently at the door of their tent, echoing the impossible odds. Impatience, that twin of doubt, began to press in. Could God truly do this? Was his timeline different? Were they misunderstanding? In a moment where the waiting felt too long, where doubt and impatience gained a dangerous foothold, they took matters into their own hands. Abraham listened to Sarah's suggestion, and they turned to Hagar, the maidservant. This decision, born of a season where trust flickered in the face of relentless waiting, led to complications that echoed through generations, a wound that is felt even today. This wasn't a moment of complete unbelief for Abraham. He still held on to the core promise, but it was a moment where the pressure of time and the whispers of doubt led to human intervention, where divine intervention was still unfolding. It reminds us that even the giants of faith wrestled in the quiet seasons. Your call to reflection arrives in this very moment, in this quiet where doubt knocks so loudly. When those voices begin their chorus, open the door not to despair, but to Scripture. Let God's truth flood the room. Recall his past faithfulness, not just the miraculous stories you read in the Bible, but the smaller, quieter miracles in your own life. The times he provided just enough, the doors he opened unexpectedly, the peace that settled over you when anxiety threatened to consume you. Remind yourself, as Abraham ultimately did, that when it came to the promise of God, he did not waver through unbelief regarding the promise of God, but was strengthened in his faith and gave glory to God, being fully persuaded that God had power to do what he had promised. Romans 4:20-21. Abraham chose persuasion over wavering. He didn't ignore the impossible circumstances, but he anchored his soul to the greater truth. God's power is not bound by our perceived limits. Doubt is a feeling, a powerful, often overwhelming emotion that arises from fear and uncertainty. But it is not a fact about God's ability. It is not a truth about His willingness to fulfill His word. Your feelings are valid. They are seen by God. But they do not define the reality of His promises. You are not defined by the volume of the doubt, but by the quiet persistence of your trust. Sometimes the most faithful response is not to feel certainty, but to choose belief anyway, step by trembling step. Let the truth of who God is silence the lies of who you fear you are not, or who you fear He might be. Imagine Abraham, standing beneath a vast, star-scattered canopy. The cool desert air whispers promises he can barely grasp, descendants as countless as the stars themselves. God's voice hangs in the silence, a divine vow etched against eternity. Genesis 15:5. What glorious hope flares in his chest in that moment. Now, shift the lens of time. Watch the relentless march of sunrises painting the eastern sky, followed by the slow descent into another star-filled night. See seasons turn, the brief burst of life after rain, the long, dry heat. Years blur into decades. Abraham was 75 when that impossible promise was first breathed into his life. Genesis 12:4. Now, the lines on his face are deeper. Sarah's womb remains stubbornly silent. 90, 95, nearing 100. The stars are still there, a silent, glittering reminder of a promise that feels increasingly like a beautiful, painful memory. 25 years, a quarter century, waiting for the key part of the promise, the heir through Sarah. Genesis 21:5. Can even begin to unfold. Feel the weight of that weight. It wasn't a polite pause. It was a profound wilderness of delay. Doubt must have been a constant companion, a serpent hissing questions. Did I misunderstand? Did God forget? Am I too old? Is Sarah? This is the raw human struggle that meets God's divine timeline. Maybe you know this feeling intimately. You stand under the stars of a promise God whispered to you, but the sunrises keep coming, and the fulfillment feels impossibly distant. You've prayed. You've hoped. Maybe you've even tried to help God along, just as Abraham and Sarah did with Hagar. And still, the silence stretches. This biblical narrative teaches us a profound, often uncomfortable truth. God's promises rarely adhere to our preferred schedule. The wait wasn't a failure of the promise. It was an integral, necessary part of its miraculous setup. The delay wasn't a denial, but a divine design to strip away any possibility that this was human effort, human strength, human timing. It highlighted God's sovereignty over biology, over circumstances, over time itself. The long road was the crucible that tested and deepened Abraham's faith, transforming a man who sometimes stumbled into the father of faith. His faithfulness wasn't perfected in a moment of receiving the promise, but forged over decades of trusting the promiser in the absence of its visible fulfillment. Reflect for a quiet moment. What promise from God are you gripping in your heart while the seasons mock your expectation? How can Abraham's long, sometimes messy wait, filled with human frailty yet marked by divine steadfastness, encourage you? His story isn't just history. It's a mirror reflecting our own struggles in the waiting room of life. It's a powerful reminder that God's plan is exponentially bigger than our immediate desires or timelines, and it often requires us to steward the process of waiting with faithfulness, not frantic striving. Your hope isn't founded on the speed of God's answer, but on the unwavering faithfulness of God Himself. His promise for you is still active, still powerful, still moving towards its perfect fulfillment, even if its arrival feels impossibly far off. Trust the journey. Trust the author. The ground shifts beneath your feet, not with a tremor, but with the slow, unsettling erosion of things you thought were solid. Your carefully laid plans, the timeline you trusted, maybe even your own strength or the understanding you had of why God was doing what He was doing, it all feels wobbly, like a building settling on unsure ground. This is the quiet work of the waiting room, isn't it? It's designed to strip away the false dependencies, those subtle crutches we lean on without even knowing it. When the scaffolding comes down, you discover the true foundation. What holds you up when everything else gives way? Is it your ability to hustle, to control the narrative, to force an outcome? Or is it something infinitely more stable? The unchanging, unwavering character of God Himself. The spiritual insight hidden in this uncomfortable space is that waiting is a divine excavation. It's God, with tender purpose, digging through the layers of our lives, unearthing the things we've unknowingly put our confidence in besides Him. Our need for predictable comfort, the opinions of others, our own limited efforts, the illusion of control. These are the things waiting exposes. When those props are gently, sometimes painfully removed, we are left with the bedrock, God alone. This is where resilient faith isn't just taught, it's forged, shaped by the very pressure of uncertainty. Jesus spoke of building your house not on the shifting sands of circumstances or self-reliance, but on the solid rock of His teaching, His truth, His very being. Matthew 7. He promised the storms would come, and the storm of prolonged waiting is certainly one of them. But He said the storms wouldn't collapse the house built on rock. They would simply reveal what foundation it was already built upon. Waiting isn't punishment, it's revelation. It's a mirror held up, showing you where your trust truly resides. So quiet your heart for a moment. Look honestly at the discomfort. What comfort, what measure of control have you been relying on more than Christ during this season of not yet? Ask God with courage to show you the hidden places where your trust is misplaced. And then, consciously, deliberately, even if it feels awkward or vulnerable, choose to shift your weight. Lean into the solid rock, Jesus Christ. Even when the waves of uncertainty crash and the future feels unpredictable, He is steadfast. He is the ground that will not give way. Build here. Trust Him here. You stand by the window, watching the rain fall, each drop a silent echo of the tears you've held back. It feels like you're stuck, suspended between the life you had and the one you dreamed of, in a place you never expected to be. Maybe it's a long waiting season for a prayer to be answered, a relationship to heal, a job to appear. Or perhaps it's the bitter sting of unfairness, a betrayal, a false accusation, a loss that wasn't your fault. You replay the moments, the injustices, the what-ifs, and a heavy weariness settles deep in your soul. You had plans, hopes, maybe even promises you believed God had whispered to your heart. And yet here you are, seemingly forgotten, in a place that feels less like a path and more like a prison. Imagine Joseph, a young man gifted with dreams from God, visions of influence, of leadership, of a future far grander than his pastoral present. He shares these dreams, perhaps naively, and finds himself hurled into a pit, not by strangers, but by the hands of his own brothers, born of envy and fear. The pit, a place of darkness, of isolation, of powerlessness, every breath an accusation, every shadow a reminder of what was lost. Sold into slavery, he finds a measure of stability in Potiphar's house, demonstrating faithfulness even in bondage. He rises, entrusted with responsibility, his God-given potential shining through the grim circumstances. But then comes the lie, the false accusation, the ultimate betrayal of trust. And the path that seemed to be leading somewhere plunges him into a deeper, colder abyss, the prison. Years stretched before him in that dungeon. Years of iron bars and stone walls, of forgotten names and broken men. The vibrant dreams must have felt like cruel mockeries in the sterile silence. He was innocent, yet condemned. Faithful, yet abandoned. This wasn't just a waiting period. It was an erasure. He could have withered into bitterness, allowing resentment to become the bars of his soul. He could have questioned everything he knew about God, about justice, about the promises that once felt so real. Why would a faithful God allow such profound, repeated injustice? Why permit the light of his promise to be extinguished in the darkness of a cell? Yet the scripture whispers a powerful truth. Joseph didn't crumble. Even in prison, forgotten by the cupbearer he had helped, he continued to serve. He used the gifts God had given him: wisdom, discernment, integrity. He chose faithfulness, not because the circumstances were favorable, but because his faith was rooted not in the comfort of his surroundings, but in the character of his unseen God. This is the profound paradox of faith. Sometimes the deepest trust is forged in the places where God seems most absent. He didn't see the future deliverance. He didn't know the exact moment the door would open. He didn't understand how years of suffering could possibly align with dreams of honor. But he chose to believe that God was with him in the prison, orchestrating events he could not perceive, weaving a purpose through pain. This is where Joseph's story reaches across the centuries and touches your own reality. Are you in a pit or a prison right now? Is the sheer unfairness of your situation, the agonizing length of your waiting, beginning to erode the edges of your faith? It's easy to trust God when the path is clear and the blessings are evident. But can you trust Him when you are forgotten, when the door is slammed shut, when the lie seems louder than the truth? The wilderness season isn't always a place of wandering aimlessly. Sometimes it's a place of refining, a quiet crucible where reliance on God is purified. The pit isn't just a hole. It's a potential altar where you lay down your right to understand and simply cling to His presence. God's plan often involves seasons of obscurity, suffering, and delay that make no sense in the moment. We grasp for clarity, begging Him to reveal the map, and He quietly offers His hand instead, asking us to trust the guide, not the guaranteed outcome. Like Joseph, you are not required to see the palace from the prison. You are simply called to choose faithfulness where you are, to serve with integrity in the small, hidden places, to trust that God is working behind the scenes, using even the cruelty of others or the harshness of delay for a purpose far greater than your current suffering. Your faithfulness in the pit, your quiet reliance in the prison, is not in vain. It is the very preparation for the path forward, a foundation being laid in the darkness, for the light that will surely come. Trust that He is with you. Trust that He is working. Your story, like Joseph's, is still being written, and the author is sovereign, even in the forgotten chapters. You sit in the quiet ache of it all, feeling the heat, not the kind that warms, but the kind that burns away comfort, security, and the easy answers you once held on to. This season of waiting, it feels exactly like stepping into a furnace, an intense, refining heat meant to purify. The world outside might see stagnation, a life on hold, but something deeper is happening within these flames. Just as precious metals are thrust into fire to burn off dross and impurities, making them stronger, brighter, and more valuable, so too is your faith being refined in this furnace of waiting. It's not comfortable. It wasn't meant to be. 1 Peter 1:6-7 whispers of this. Tests coming so that faith, more precious than gold refined by fire, may prove genuine. The spiritual insight here is a profound, gentle paradox. The waiting is not merely about God preparing something for you. It is perhaps more deeply, more crucially, about God preparing you for something. This divine heat is burning away the parts of you that hinder the holy work. Self-reliance, the restless need for immediate gratification, the impatient urge to control outcomes. It's shaping perseverance in the molten core of your spirit. It's deepening a humility that understands God's timing is perfect, even when it feels slow. It's forging a resilient faith, one that is anchored not in what God does, but in who God is. The fire reveals the true substance of your trust. Consider the ancient story of the 3 young men thrown into a literal fiery furnace for refusing to bow. Daniel 3. They stood firm. Their faith wasn't primarily in being rescued from the fire, though they believed God could do it. Their faith was in God with them in the fire. Even if He does not, they declared, we still will not bow. Their conviction wasn't about escape. It was about allegiance and trust in the one who walks through the flames with you. That 4th figure in the fire? He's still there, in your furnace, in your wait. So look into the heart of the heat you are experiencing. What is God burning away in this season of intense waiting? What impurities of self, what hidden idols of reliance on things other than Him is He seeking to remove? It is painful, yes, but it is purposeful. Embrace the heat, even as you cry out from within it. Trust that the refiner's fire is a holy process designed to make you more like pure gold, radiant and valuable in His sight. This isn't destruction, it's purification. This isn't abandonment, it's intimacy in the very place you feel most alone. Let the fire do its sacred work. You sit in the quiet of your room, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the refrigerator or the distant sound of traffic. On the desk lies a stack of rejections, polite, impersonal emails that feel like a physical blow each time they land in your inbox. You've sent out resumes into the digital void, tailored cover letters until your fingers ached, navigated awkward networking events, and gone on interviews where you felt a connection, a spark, a promise of possibility that ultimately fizzled into nothing. Or perhaps it's a deeper stir, a sense of divine calling that feels imprinted on your very soul, a purpose whispered in prayer. But the path to step into it remains overgrown, the gate locked, the door refusing to budge. You watch from the shore as others launch their boats, their sails catching the wind, moving confidently towards their horizons. while you remain tethered, qualified perhaps, undeniably willing, yet undeniably stationary. The weight of this waiting presses down, a heavy cloak woven with threads of doubt and disappointment, whispers asking if your effort was seen, if your prayer was heard. It's easy to fall into the trap of human hustle, believing that enough effort, enough strategy, enough relentless knocking will eventually force the door open. And effort is important, like tending the soil before planting the seed. But the deeper truth, the truth woven into the very fabric of God's economy, is that forward movement isn't solely a product of your striving. It is profoundly shaped by divine appointment. Your resume lands in the right hands at the right moment, not just because of your hustle, but because God orchestrated the encounter. The door to your calling swings open not when you finally summon enough strength to kick it down, but when God, in His perfect timing, decides it is time. Sometimes the closed door isn't a definitive no, a judgment on your worth or potential. It is often a gentle, sometimes firm, not yet, a not this way, or even a protective, I have something infinitely better waiting for you. Think of Paul, burning with zeal to preach the gospel in Bithynia, ready to pour his energy into that region. But the Spirit of Jesus, in His mysterious wisdom, would not allow him. Acts 16:7. A closed door, a redirection that led to a Macedonian vision, to a whole new continent thirsty for the gospel. The path he wanted was closed, but the path God intended was waiting. A different ocean, a different harbor. What if this season of waiting, this frustrating immobility before the unopened door, isn't a delay of your destiny, but the necessary season of preparation for your destiny? What if the silence is God's hands shaping you, refining your faith, teaching you patience, perhaps even protecting you from a premature entry into something that wasn't fully ready for you, or you weren't fully ready for? Sometimes the fastest way forward is to learn to stand still in faith. How can you surrender the urgency of your timeline for the perfection of His? Can you trust that the one who knit you together, who sees your qualifications, hears the cry of your desire, and knows the calling He has placed within you, is actively working behind the scenes? He is not ignoring your knocking. He is discerning the right door, the one that aligns perfectly with His purpose for you, opening it at the right time. Rest in the stillness, in the knowledge that His sovereign guidance is more reliable than any map you could draw. The wilderness journey often prepares you for the promised land. The desert teaches you to value the river. Trust the guide who knows the way, even when the path forward is hidden. Your screen loads in an instant, the information you seek delivered before you can even take a breath. Next day delivery is too slow. Same day is the standard. We are wired for speed, our natural inclination to expect every area of life to operate at the pace of a fiber optic cable. And perhaps nowhere does this feel more acutely frustrating than in our walk of faith. We pray, we ask, we lay bare our most urgent needs, and then we check our spiritual inbox, expecting an immediate reply, a divine notification confirming receipt and promising swift action. When His response doesn't arrive on our urgent timeline, when the job doesn't materialize, the healing doesn't come, the relationship doesn't mend exactly when we need it to, it doesn't just feel like a delay. It can feel like a failure, a fundamental problem with the system. Is He listening? Does He care? The silence can feel like a judgment, a rejection, or simply proof that our clock is broken. or worse, that His is. We grip our own timelines tightly, convinced that our plan, our timing, is the only path to comfort, safety, or success. The anxiety builds in the waiting room of life, each tick of our human clock louder than the quiet assurance of faith. But the truth, the profound, comforting, sometimes challenging truth, is that God exists outside of our linear perception of time. He doesn't wear a watch, nor does He consult a calendar dictated by human convenience or comfort. As Isaiah 46:10 tells us, He declares the end from the beginning, seeing the entire intricate tapestry of existence in a single, eternal glance. His timing isn't slow. It's perfect because it's calibrated to His eternal purposes. A grand design that encompasses countless factors you cannot possibly see or comprehend. He is not merely addressing your single need in isolation. He is coordinating hearts, aligning circumstances, moving pieces across a cosmic chessboard, preparing the soil, sowing the seeds, waiting for the precise moment when everything converges for His will to be accomplished in the most beautiful, fruitful, and eternally significant way. Think of the disciples, the generation that walked the earth anticipating the Messiah. They waited for years, generations even, holding on to promises whispered through prophets. Yet, when Jesus finally came, His timing was unexpected, His method entirely different from their expectations. They looked for a political king to overthrow Rome. God sent a suffering servant to conquer sin and death itself. His delay wasn't a lack of response. It was the meticulous preparation for a salvation far grander than they could imagine. This divine difference in timing is not about withholding. It's about perfecting. His patience with you, mentioned in 2 Peter 3:8-9, is not slowness. It's grace, allowing every necessary piece to fall into place, allowing hearts to soften, circumstances to align, and you to be prepared for what He has prepared for you. Your reflection point hangs in the air. What aspects of your urgent timeline are you holding on to most tightly, convinced that your clock must be God's clock? Can you, even in the quiet frustration of waiting, begin to surrender your clock to His, trusting that His perspective is infinitely wiser, His plan infinitely more comprehensive than yours? Trusting that sometimes the longest wait is the fastest way into His perfect will. You sit in the quiet, feeling the slow grind of waiting. The journey you thought would take a few swift steps feels like an endless trek across barren ground. You've prayed for speed, for a clear path, for arrival. And still, the horizon seems just as distant as it did yesterday. This lingering season, this sense of being between, mirrors a story etched deep in ancient sand. Picture the Israelites, standing vibrant with the recent memory of the Red Sea parting, the dust of Egypt shaken from their feet. They were right there, at the very threshold of the Promised Land, the land flowing with milk and honey, everything God had promised. It wasn't a great distance, a journey that should have taken perhaps 11 days, maybe a few weeks at most, Deuteronomy 1:2. Instead, the calendar pages tore away, year after year, until 40 long, arduous years had passed in the wilderness. Numbers 14:33-34. 40 years of wandering, of circling back on themselves, the landscape a monotonous canvas of dust and rock. 40 years defined by the stark reality of their dependence, the daily appearance of manna like dew, the sudden abundance of quail, the desperate search for water, the constant, gnawing ache of doubt and complaint. Why such a delay? Why the prolonged hardship? The scriptures are clear, stark, and unflinching. Their lack of faith. Their hearts, so recently freed from physical bondage, remained captive to fear and unbelief when faced with the giants in the land. The challenges God asked them to step into and possess. They longed, with a perverse nostalgia, for the familiar discomfort of Egypt, the predictable scarcity, rather than embracing the challenging abundance of God's promise. Their complaining became a bitter anthem across the desert plains. This biblical story is a powerful, even painful reminder that our posture, our attitude, our faith, or lack thereof, during the waiting, can profoundly shape the length and nature of the journey itself. But the wilderness was more than a consequence. It was a classroom, custom designed by God. It was a place calculated to strip away every last shred of self-sufficiency, every illusion of control. In the face of total lack, the Israelites were forced into complete, moment-by-moment dependence on the invisible hand that guided them. Dependence for their daily bread, manna, for water drawn miraculously from solid rock, for direction by a cloud in the day and fire by night, for protection in a harsh environment. It was here, in the nothingness, that God revealed himself as the ultimate provider, the ever-present sustainer, the only source of security. Freedom was found, paradoxically, within the confinement of the barren plains, as they learned the true freedom of trusting the one who led them. Their wandering wasn't solely a consequence of their sin. It was also a period of vital spiritual formation, preparing a generation born in the wilderness, weaned on manna and reliance, to possess the land their parents forfeited through fear. Now, turn the lens inward. What is God trying to teach you about radical, moment-by-moment dependence on Him in your current wilderness season? This place of waiting, uncertainty, or unexpected difficulty. Are you spending your energy complaining about the manna, the simple daily provisions, the small graces, the strength just for today? Or are you recognizing it as a daily miracle, a tangible sign of His faithful presence and provision even here in the dry place? Embrace the lessons etched into the landscape of your wilderness. They are not punishments, they are preparations. They are refining your faith, deepening your roots, revealing the God who walks with you, preparing you step by difficult step for the promised land ahead. The road vanishes behind you. Not a turn you missed, but the path itself dissolves into sand and silence. You look left, right, ahead. Only vast, empty space stretches out. This wasn't the destination you planned, but somehow you've arrived in your own wilderness season. The neatly packed supplies of self-sufficiency feel flimsy now. The map of your life, once so clear, is blank. Panic taps at the edges of your breath. A cold wind reminding you just how little control you actually possess. This feeling, this stark realization of lack, is the first lesson the wilderness teaches. It strips away the illusion that you are the architect of your own survival. There are no familiar landmarks here, no storehouses you can open, no well-worn trails leading efficiently to comfort. Just bare necessity, exposed vulnerability, and an unsettling quiet where the noise of your own striving used to be. Think of the Israelites, 40 years in the most literal, unforgiving wilderness. No farms, no cities, no established trade routes. Their journey was a masterclass in forced dependence. Every single morning, they woke up needing God to show up. Manna, appearing like frost on the ground, was their breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Exodus 16. Not stored up for weeks, but provided fresh, day by day, just enough. When thirst threatened to consume them, water gushed from a solid rock at God's command. Exodus 17. And through the scorching sun and the chilling nights, a visible presence, a cloud by day, fire by night, guided their steps and shielded them. Exodus 40. Survival wasn't about their ingenuity or strength. It was about God's reliable, moment-by-moment appearing. Their wilderness was a physical place, but the spiritual truth echoes through our own barren stretches. God often leads us into seasons of waiting, uncertainty, or lack, not to punish us, but precisely to cultivate that same profound dependence. It's in the barren places that the roots of our faith are forced to go deeper, searching not for surface moisture, but for the subterranean river of His provision. He wants to become your daily bread, not just a supplement you reach for when other sources fail. He wants to be your living water, the only source that truly satisfies the deepest thirsts of your soul. He wants His voice, not the loud clamor of your fears or the world's demands, to be your constant, reliable guide. This season you find yourself in, the one that feels like wandering, like being stuck, like everything you thought you could count on has evaporated. It's designed to teach you that His sufficiency is truly enough. It's where you learn to live, not by sight, not by what your hands can grasp or your plans can secure, but by the quiet certainty of His presence and His promises. It's a paradox. In your utter lack, you discover His immeasurable fullness. In the stripping away of your control, you find the freedom of being held entirely in His hands. Look closely at this difficult season. How is it forcing you to lean on God in ways you never had to before? Are you fighting this dependence, frustrated by the loss of self-reliance? Or are you slowly, perhaps reluctantly at first, embracing it as an opportunity to know Him as your sustainer, your guide, your constant companion? He isn't asking for you to find the way out on your own. He's asking you to rely on Him completely for the next step, and the one after that. He is your manna, your rock, your cloud and fire, right here, right now. In this unexpected wilderness, let the barrenness lead you to the wellspring of His inexhaustible grace. The ache sits deep, a hollow space where wholeness should be. Perhaps it's the persistent thrum of a body that refuses to mend, a physical weariness that shadows your days and steals your sleep. Or maybe it's the silence on the other end of a phone call that never comes, the strained distance in a once close relationship, the echoing absence of a loved one who has drifted away. This is the waiting for healing or for connection, a deeply personal wilderness where the heart cries out for restoration, for a mending, for the simple grace of feeling seen and known and loved in return. You sit in the quiet, or perhaps in the bustling noise of a world that seems to rush past your stillness, and the vulnerability is raw, exposed. The questions prick. Why isn't it happening? Am I forgotten? Loneliness can be a crushing weight in this specific kind of waiting, a feeling that no one truly understands the depth of the ache you carry. You might feel like a solitary figure in a vast, empty room, holding on to a fragile thread of hope. This waiting doesn't just touch the surface of your life. It reaches down into the very core of who you are, stirring fears of being permanently broken or eternally alone. But look closely. Listen gently. The spiritual truth here is profoundly tender. God is not distant from this pain. He enters into your vulnerability, your loneliness, your waiting. Consider Jesus, the man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, Isaiah 53:3. He knew profound loneliness in the Garden of Gethsemane, Matthew 26:36-46, facing his deepest trial while his closest companions slept. Your waiting for healing or connection is not unnoticed by him. It does not escape his gaze or his heart. He understands the ache, not just intellectually, but intimately, experientially. This season, as agonizing as it may be, holds a quiet invitation. It is an invitation to find your deepest healing and your most profound connection in Him first. He is the great physician, the one who can mend the unseen fractures of the soul, even while you wait for the physical body to respond. He is the God who is always present, the one constant companion in the wilderness of loneliness. This divine presence is not a substitute for the longed-for earthly outcome, the restored health, the reconciled relationship, the longed-for friendship. No, it is the source of strength, comfort, and real healing that sustains you within the waiting, allowing you to walk through the valley without being consumed by it. He offers a connection that no human can sever, a love that is unconditional and ever-present. Can you, just for a moment, invite God into the most vulnerable, exposed parts of your waiting? Whisper the pain, the fear, the crushing loneliness to Him. Don't try to fix it or make it presentable. Simply hold it out. Ask Him to show you His presence and comfort in new, unexpected ways right there in the midst of the ache. Trust that He is working, even when the outward healing or connection hasn't manifested yet. His plans are not always visible immediately, but His hand is always moving, always holding you. He is your truest healer, mending what only He can reach, and your most constant, unwavering companion. Allow yourself the quiet courage to lean into that truth, even when the waiting feels endless. You check the clock again. The minutes stretch into hours, the days into weeks, and the answer, the breakthrough, the moment you've been pleading for, remains just out of reach. This isn't a sprint. It feels like an endless marathon through a parched desert of delay. Every fiber of your being screams for movement, for progress, for anything other than this quiet, aching stillness. This is the fire where patience is forged, not in comfortable waiting rooms, but in the raw, exposed landscape of prolonged uncertainty. Patience isn't a switch you flip. It's a muscle you build, groaningly, sometimes tearfully. It's a fruit of the Spirit, yes, Galatians 5:22. But like any fruit, it needs time, nourishment, and the challenging climate of real life to ripen. What better cultivator of this essential quality than the very thing we often resist the most? Waiting. This season you find yourself in, where the path ahead is shrouded and the timing feels impossibly slow, isn't passive stagnation. It's an active, divine cultivation of endurance, perseverance, and profound trust. It is choosing daily, hourly, to believe that God's timing is perfect, even when it makes no earthly sense, even when it requires you to walk by faith through a fog so thick you can barely see your hand in front of your face. The ancient words echo across time, a lifeline to souls weary from the wait. The writer of Hebrews urges us to persevere, so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. For, in just a little while, he who is coming will come, and will not delay. But my righteous one will live by faith, and I take no pleasure in the one who shrinks back. Hebrews 10:36 through 38. Perseverance and patience are not weaknesses. They are the dynamic, unwavering posture of faith in the face of delay. They are the quiet conviction that the promise keeper is faithful, even when the promise feels delayed. They are the strength found in letting go of control. This period of waiting is stretching you, refining you, making you stronger in ways you might not yet recognize. It's like a runner training for a long race. The difficult miles, the aching muscles, the moments of wanting to quit, they aren't wasted time. They are the making of the athlete. Your spirit, too, is being conditioned for the journey ahead. Instead of viewing this waiting as a punishment or a pause, what if you saw it as a divine training ground, a sacred space where God is specifically strengthening your spiritual core? He is building resilience, deepening your dependence on Him, and teaching your soul the quiet power of simply being in His presence, rather than constantly striving or pushing. Don't pull away from the discomfort of the wait. Press into Him within it. Allow patience, forged in this very fire of delay, to do its perfect, transformative work in you. The shadows lengthen around you, not just outside your window, but inside your heart. You feel the weight of dreams deferred, of promises whispered into the wind that seem to echo back unheard. You were told, perhaps even felt it deep within your spirit, that you were set apart for something more, something significant, an anointing, a calling, a glimpse of a future you were meant to inhabit. Yet, here you are, not on a throne, not walking in the sunlight of that promised land, but in a place that feels a lot like hiding, a place of uncertainty, of constant vigilance, maybe even of feeling actively pursued by circumstances, doubts, or opposition that seems relentless. Think of David, a young man, likely still awkward in his frame, called from tending sheep in the fields of Jesse. The prophet Samuel arrives, horn of oil in hand, and the divine choosing happens. David is anointed king over Israel. 1 Samuel 16. The oil seeps into his scalp, a physical sign of an invisible, undeniable promise from God. He is the chosen one. He carries the scent of destiny on his skin. You'd expect a coronation, a swift ascent to power, a national celebration of the future king. But that's not the story, not even close. Instead of a palace, David finds himself navigating treacherous terrain. Instead of servants, he leads a band of misfits and outcasts. Instead of a crown, he wears the weary cloak of a fugitive. The current king, Saul, tormented by his own insecurities and spiritual decline, becomes consumed with jealousy and a desperate desire to eliminate David. Saul, who represents the established order, the visible power, the present reality, actively hunts the one who holds God's future promise. David is forced into the wilderness, into caves, into foreign lands, always on the run. His life becomes a constant tightrope walk between survival and faith, between despair and the quiet, persistent memory of that day with the oil. Years pass, not days or weeks, but years. Years spent in the dust, in the darkness of caves, living hand to mouth, always looking over his shoulder. The contrast is stark, almost cruelly ironic, anointed for a throne, living like a criminal. Chosen for greatness, hiding in holes in the ground. He held the promise, but lived the pursuit. This wasn't a detour, it was the path. This wasn't a delay. It was the necessary season. This wasn't God forgetting. It was God cultivating. This biblical narrative isn't just ancient history. It's a mirror reflecting the often unseen valleys in our own faith journeys. You may feel like David in that cave. You have a promise, perhaps a word from God, a deep sense of calling, a vision for your future or your family. You believe it, you hold on to it. Yet the reality of your life feels like the exact opposite of that promise. You are in a season where you feel hidden, maybe overlooked at work, maybe unseen in your efforts. Maybe your gifts feel buried. Maybe your prayers seem to hit a ceiling. You feel pursued by financial strain, by relational conflict, by health issues, by persistent anxieties that hunt you down in the quiet hours. You wonder, if God promised me this, why am I here? Why this waiting? Why this difficulty? Did I misunderstand? Has God changed his mind? The cave feels isolating, the pursuit is exhausting, and the gap between the anointing and the arrival seems vast, almost unbridgeable. It feels like your time is being wasted, like this season of hiding is a holding pattern that serves no purpose other than to drain your hope. But the spiritual insight from David's story is profoundly counterintuitive, a gentle paradox woven into the fabric of God's timing. The waiting is not wasted. It is preparation. The hiding is not abandonment. It is honing. The pursuit is not punishment. It is proving. God is not absent in the cave. He is intensely present, shaping you. He is using the pressure of this season to forge the character required for the promise. Think of what David learned in those years. Dependence on God became not just a theological concept, but his very lifeline. Leading a motley crew of debtors, distressed, and discontented men, 1 Samuel 22:2, taught him compassionate, resilient leadership, far better than any royal court could. Facing constant danger honed his trust, his strategic thinking, and his reliance on divine intervention. He wrote many of the Psalms during this time, raw, honest conversations with God from the depths of despair and soaring heights of trust, shaping his heart into one described as a man after God's own heart. He wasn't ready for the throne the day he was anointed. The cave years made him ready. The hiding prepared him to lead. The pursuit taught him how to truly trust the one who sees him in the darkness. Perhaps your current season feels like a cave. Perhaps you feel hidden, overlooked, or even hunted by the circumstances of life, despite knowing, or at least hoping, that God has a promise for you. Trust this truth. God sees you in that cave. He is not surprised by your hiding place. This season is not a mistake. It is essential to the unfolding of His plan for you. He is using the limitations, the frustrations, the very pressures of this time to prepare you, to strengthen you, to equip you for the very thing He has promised. Your time in hiding is not wasted. It is crucial to the shaping of the leader, the servant, the person God intends you to be when your appointed time arrives. The darkness of the cave precedes the light of the throne. The waiting period is not empty time. It is holy ground where faith is forged in the fire of refinement. Trust that the God who anointed David in the fields is with you in your wilderness. You look at the calendar, and it feels like the pages are stuck together, like time itself has developed a stutter, repeating the same blank moment day after day. The silence of waiting isn't just auditory. It's a deep, resonant stillness in your soul, a quiet that screams, "Nothing is happening." You scroll through the highlight reels of others' lives, promotions announced, engagements shared, babies born, doors flying open, and your own story feels paused. A draft gathering dust. Anxiety coils in your stomach. Did God forget? Did I miss something? Is this prayer, this longing, simply a wasted season, a barren stretch of road leading nowhere? The wind outside sighs, a lonely sound mirroring the quiet ache within you. You've done the hard work, the praying, the believing, the surrendering, and yet the breakthrough remains stubbornly invisible, hidden behind a veil of unanswered time. It feels like standing still in a world that rushes past, a solitary figure beneath the gray sky, wondering if the sun will ever rise on your season of waiting. But lean closer. Listen not just to the wind, but to the whisper beneath it. This profound, counterintuitive truth: waiting is rarely empty time in God's economy. It feels empty to us because our human eyes are fixed on the surface, on the visible, the tangible, the things that can be marked on a calendar or posted online. We judge progress by what we can see and measure. Yet, the divine perspective reveals a hidden dimension of activity. While you sit in the stillness, wrestling with doubt and clinging to hope by a thread, God is intensely, purposefully, diligently at work. He is not idle. His hands are not tied. He is operating on a different timeline and in unseen realms. Think of it like this: He's building your roots deeper into His truth, where no human eye can perceive. You might feel shaken by the storms of delayed hope, but the unseen reality is that your spiritual foundation is being fortified, made stronger, more resilient, able to withstand the very pressures that make you feel weak now. This season isn't about your inactivity. It's about His activity in you, building the inner strength you will need when the breakthrough finally arrives. He's not just working on you, He's working around you. He's orchestrating events in the lives of others, people you don't know, circumstances you can't influence, aligning details, shifting pieces on a cosmic chessboard, preparing the precise environment necessary for the fulfillment of His promise to you. The person who will hire you isn't ready yet. The resources needed aren't in place yet. The circumstances that will allow the promise to flourish haven't fully ripened. Your waiting is often tied to the preparation of others and the preparation of the stage upon which your next chapter will unfold. The spiritual insight here is breathtakingly profound, a gentle paradox that challenges our limited view. The invisible work God does during your waiting season is often more crucial, more foundational, and ultimately more significant than the visible breakthrough itself. We crave the fruit, the blossom, the finished structure, but God is focused on the soil, the seed, the hidden roots, the quiet preparation. It's the unseen foundation, the hidden growth, the quiet maturing that makes the future fruit possible, sustainable, and truly God-honoring. Without the deep roots established in the darkness, the plant cannot withstand the winds when it reaches for the sun. Without the quiet conditioning of the runner, they cannot endure the race. Without the hidden work in the crucible, the metal cannot be refined. Consider the simple yet miraculous journey of a seed planted in the ground. For a time, nothing is visible above the surface. The gardener waters and waits. It looks like an empty patch of earth. But underground, in the dark, unseen by any casual observer, something vital is happening. The seed is breaking open, a paradox of life beginning in apparent decay. Roots are growing, pushing downwards, establishing a strong anchor, drawing nutrients from the soil. This hidden work, this quiet preparation, is absolutely essential. It's establishing the life support system that will sustain the plant when it finally breaks through the soil and grows upwards towards the light, bearing leaves, flowers, and fruit. Your waiting season is like that seed underground. It feels dark, it feels stagnant, it feels unseen. But God is there, nurturing, strengthening, establishing the roots of your faith, your character, your resilience, preparing the soil around you, ensuring that when the time is right, your breakthrough will not only happen, but will be sustained by the unseen work He has completed within and around you. How can you shift your perspective then, from viewing this waiting as wasted time, as a frustrating pause, to seeing it as a season of vital, necessary, unseen preparation by a faithful, sovereign God? Can you find a quiet corner in your heart that trusts He is working diligently behind the scenes for your good and His glory, even when every external indicator suggests otherwise? Can you believe that every single moment in His hand, even the ones marked by silence and delay, has a profound purpose? He isn't just preparing the promise for you, He is preparing you for the promise. And that hidden preparation is never empty. It is always brimming with divine intention. Trust the quiet work. Trust the unseen process. Trust the gardener, the noise. It surrounds you, doesn't it? The relentless hum of demands, the sharp edges of comparison, the deafening roar of what-ifs and never-wills. You sit in the silence you tried to carve out, yet the silence itself seems loud, echoing with unmet expectations and the ticking clock of impatience. Is God even in this space? Can He possibly speak above the din that feels like your very soul is vibrating with chaos? It's hard to hear the gentle, quiet voice of God when everything inside and outside is screaming for your attention, demanding action, fueling fear. Maybe you've been running, chasing solutions, trying to outpace the anxiety that trails you like a shadow. You've sought answers in the whirlwind of activity, in the fire of urgent crisis, hoping God would appear in a dramatic display, confirming His presence and power. But He wasn't there, not in the way you expected. Just like Elijah on the mountain, He often passes by the wind, the earthquake, and the fire, choosing instead the gentle whisper, the still small voice. 1 Kings 19:11-12. He is not silent in your waiting. You may just need to tune your spiritual ears, learning to discern His subtle presence and guidance amidst the overwhelming noise of your circumstances and anxieties. It's a profound paradox. The loudest truth is often found in the quietest moments. This isn't about finding God after the storm passes. It's about discovering He is in the stillness the storm creates within you, if you allow it. He is near to the brokenhearted, the ones feeling fractured and overwhelmed by the noise. Psalm 34:18. He is a refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Psalm 46:1. And where is this refuge most tangible when the world is loud? Often it's in the quiet shelter of His presence, cultivated in stillness. He is waiting with you, not just for the outcome you desire, but in the present moment, speaking comfort and truth into your soul. The waiting isn't empty time, it's hallowed ground for listening. Consider the farmer waiting for the rain, the seed hidden in the ground. There is no noise, no rushing wind, no fire, just the slow, silent work beneath the surface. Yet, it is in this unseen stillness, this patient waiting, that life happens. God works in the quiet. He transforms in the hidden seasons. Your impatience, The noise it generates within you often stems from a deep-seated fear that nothing is happening, that you are forgotten, that God is static while your life feels volatile. But His power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the gentle, persistent pressure shaping the mountain. The slow unfolding of a bud in the morning sun. The invitation today is not to strive harder, but to stillness. It's not about forcing an answer, but about positioning your heart to hear the one already being whispered. Can you create space for quiet stillness in your day, even for just a few minutes? Turn off the distractions that scream for your attention. The phone, the endless scroll, the mental to-do list that never shrinks. Quiet the internal noise of worry, planning, rehearsing conversations, dwelling on disappointments. Simply invite His presence into that space. It might feel awkward, unproductive even. The silence might initially amplify the noise you were trying to escape. But persist. This is the spiritual discipline of tuning your ear, like finding a faint signal on a radio amidst static. Ask Him to help you perceive Him in the quiet. Ask Him to help you hear His voice, His gentle reassurance, His guiding nudge, His simple presence. Ask Him to feel His comforting nearness in the midst of your waiting. He doesn't need a grand stage to speak. He needs a listening heart. Maybe His whisper isn't a booming directive, but a gentle affirmation of your worth, a quiet peace settling over your anxiety, a flicker of hope lighting the dark corners of your doubt. He might be speaking through the sunrise, the simple rhythm of your breath, the unexpected kindness of a stranger, or the quiet prompting in your spirit to rest. Your part is to quiet the noise and listen. Trust isn't just believing He will act. It's believing He is present and active now, even when the only sound is the beating of your own heart in the stillness. His presence in the quiet moments is your anchor in the storm that rages outside, and your steady hope in the quiet waiting that feels endless. He is nearer than your next breath, waiting for you to simply pause and listen. You have walked through a season of waiting. The air has often felt thick with unspoken prayers, and the silence after your petitions has sometimes echoed louder than any answer. You have wrestled with the quiet demons of doubt, faced the sharp edge of frustration, felt the sting of unmet expectations settle deep in your soul. And yet, in this crucible of delay, something else has begun to form. Perhaps, hopefully, a deeper, more resilient reliance on the one who holds all time in His hands. As this season of intense reflection draws towards its close, the most powerful truth, the single unwavering anchor for your soul, is not the certainty of when your waiting will end or how your story will resolve. The ultimate anchor is the unwavering certainty of who God is. His faithfulness is not some fragile thing, dependent on your fleeting feelings, shifting circumstances, or the speed with which He aligns the stars to your timetable. No. His faithfulness is the bedrock of His very being. It is His character, a constant, unwavering attribute, as solid and sure as the dawn breaking over the mountains. Lamentations 3:22-23. His mercies are new every morning, because He is faithful every morning. Think of the tapestry of faith woven through history. He was faithful to Abraham, leading him through decades of waiting for the Son of Promise, through tests that felt insurmountable. He was faithful to Joseph, upholding him in the desolate pit and the unjust prison cell, turning betrayal into preservation. He was faithful to Israel, guiding them through the bewildering wilderness, providing manna in the dust and water from the rock. He was faithful to David, hiding him in the dark, lonely cave while a king hunted him, shaping a shepherd's heart into that of a king after his own heart. And just as surely, he is faithful to you right now, in the quiet, uncertain space of your waiting. Here is the profound, soul-settling insight. God's promises are not conditional maybes. They are yes and amen in Christ Jesus. 2 Corinthians 1:20. They are sealed, certain, unbreakable covenants flowing from His unchangeable nature. His plan for you is not haphazard or indifferent. It is good, sovereignly designed to give you a hope and a future, a flourishing end that far surpasses the limits of your current sight. Jeremiah 29:11. Your waiting, therefore, does not mean He has forgotten you. It means He is carefully, sovereignly, and lovingly unfolding His perfect plan, timing each step with divine precision. The clay is still on the potter's wheel. The masterpiece is not yet complete. Your task, then, in the tender closing moments of this season, is not to strain and strive to control the timing, to force the door open before His hand moves. Your sacred task is to trust the timekeeper, to exhale the need for control, and to inhale the reality of His sovereign grace. To rest in the profound knowledge that the one who began a good work in you, planting seeds of faith and transformation even in the barren soil of waiting, will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Philippians 1:6. Even if the waiting continues, you are not waiting alone. He is there. He is working. He is faithful. You are held securely, not by the strength of your grip on the promise, but by the unbreakable strength of His hands holding you, even in the deepest uncertainty. His presence is your ultimate promise, more valuable than the answer itself. He is singing over you in the stillness, whispering hope in the quiet, assuring you that your story is unfolding exactly as He intends. Step by faithful step, light breaking through the gray. Rest in Him. Trust Him always. They didn't see the end, but they trusted the author, and that was enough.